Hello there everyone, Art Burns here, wishing you well today. Hope you're all having a great day today. And you know what? If some of you aren't having a great day today, well then please know that you have my compassion and you have my empathy, because I know what it's like to struggle, especially in these times, right? You might be struggling with, financial worries, or with, problems with the children, or just plain old, want life to get back to what it used to be, right? And if these are the things that are going on for you, then please, understand that you do have my empathy and my compassion, but also understand that this might be the perfect video for you if that's how you're feeling today. If you're struggling with anything, I want you to know that what I want to talk about today is that nothing is permanent. Right? The concept of impermanence is one of our greatest allies, okay? When we're talking about, especially as parents, as we try to help our children manage their big emotions, right? But even with ourselves, yesterday I talked about acceptance, right? And acceptance, for now, is the most important thing we can do, right? As we can accept our given situation, right? Accept the fact that it's not a great day. Accept the fact that, that the children are, stuck inside still. Accept the fact that, that they're not in school where they should be, and our lives are still, turned upside down around here, in our lives, accepting this is the difference between allowing ourselves to get, wrapped up in this emotional, swirling, hectic, just a hurricane of emotions sometimes, right? The difference between that and simply weathering this storm, right? Is acceptance, right? So, but how do we accept, right? One of the greatest ways of accepting is to remember that nothing is permanent. Right? Now, again, this is particularly important when we're dealing with our children, especially as our children are dealing with their big emotions, right? Yes, it helps to be empathic for your children. Yes, it helps to remember that they are stuck inside too. And even though they tell you that they hate school and everything like that, they want to go back to normal just as much as we do, right? They're not having a great time either. So it's important to remember that, right? But even more importantly, even in normal times, right, even outside of the pandemic that we're dealing with right now, the really important thing to understand is that nothing is permanent, especially when we talk about our emotions. Now, I talk about this a lot, right? Jill Bolte Taylor, the neuroanatomist who had a stroke while she was in the shower before work one day, right? She tells us that emotions in the body only lasts for about 90 seconds, right? Anything past 90 seconds, the reason why it's still there is because we are feeding it, right? We are giving it fuel. We are feeding it with our thoughts and our expectations, our lack of acceptance, right? So when we can remember and recognize the fact that the emotions that our children are feeling, right, or the emotions that we're feeling due to the emotions that our children are feeling, they're not permanent. They're actually very temporary. And as long as you can give it the appropriate amount of time, then things will always cool off. Now, I say that with our emotions as adults, right, we feed the fire, right, by throwing, the wood of thoughts onto the fire, right? Like when we're feeling an emotion, of, say an emotion of regret, right, or even shame. Shame is a really big emotion that a lot of us feel on some levels, right? And when we feel shame, right, we start feeling the shame, and then we have thoughts about all the other things that make us feel shame, and then we feel more shame, and we feel shame about the shame, and then we feel ashamed that we're so ashamed, and it just keeps going and going and going, and that's where it grows into something that now, hours, days can go by where you're just in this funk, right? But that's because you're feeding it with the thoughts, right? So when it comes to our children, the way that we can feed the emotions for them is by trying to change it. Okay, and that is oftentimes the least effective thing you can do. I mean, sure, it's fine to cheer your children up. It's always a good idea to offer them a hug, to place a loving hand on them and allow them to go through the emotions with your support. That is absolutely something we should always try to do. Okay. But it's when we try to say, come on, we have to do this thing, we're late, I need you to, get in the car, stop crying, get in the car, right? When we do that, all we're doing is the same thing with us, right? At that point, our children go from being upset about whatever it was they were upset about in the beginning. Now they're sad because we're hassling them, right? We're kind of, not only just hassling them, not only just bothering them, but also we're showing them that their emotions don't matter that much, right? That getting to an appointment on time is more important than the emotions that the children are feeling, right? And so oftentimes what this is going to do is this is going to cause a further emotion, right? Which, again, going from something that was, maybe for a child, like maybe they were sad because, they, like my son this morning, right? He was on a game with his friend, and they play this Fortnite game on the internet together. And so something happened in the game. He got very, very upset, right? And so, so it was like an anger, right? It was an anger, it was a regret, it was sadness, it was a cornucopia of different emotions that he's feeling, of course, which is always the case, right? It's never just one emotion that we're feeling, even as adults, right? But whatever he was feeling there, right now, my wife had to go to the store, right? And he was supposed to go with her to the store, and wanting to get outside. We want him to, get out into the world and, get some fresh air, turn off the screens for a couple of hours, And he was just like, no, I'm sad right now. I'm like literally put his head under his blanket on the couch and just, just was like not having it, right? So there we had a choice, right? Now we could feel that we have to get to the store and you have to get back because our other child has something they need to do. And so, so there is a time sensitivity here, right? It's not just like we're living this life where, okay, it doesn't matter, and that's how life is, right? But we could be very rigid about having to get to that appointment, whatever it is, and tell my son, like, look, you just gotta, proverbial suck it up and just get in the car. Come on, we gotta go, right? And what's gonna happen if we do that is that he's gonna then again get more upset, right? He's gonna then feel that we're not allowing him to do what he wants to do, and then he's gonna get, he's gonna dig in his heels, right? Emotionally, right? And now we're dealing with a bigger emotion, and now, of course, our emotion is going to be tweaked as well, because now we're gonna be like, oh no, now we're really late, and now we gotta go, like, come on, dude. And now we're gonna start getting a little more tense. He's going to feel that tension from us, and then he's going to get more emotional, and it just builds and builds and builds and builds until, now forget about it. We can't go to the store now. We can't do any of this stuff. We got to cancel appointments. We got to change everything now, right? Because of what happened, right? Alternatively, my wife and I, which thankfully is this is what we actually did, we can accept the fact that this is what's happening, right? It's not convenient, it's not ideal, it's not what we want, it's not the thing that we planned for, but this is what's happening. And if we can accept it and simply allow it to happen, right? And give my son the 5 or 10 minutes that he needs to just work out that emotion, right? And just allow it to cool down. Actually took maybe about 15 to 20 minutes today because it was a particularly rough thing. But again, remembering that he's been stuck inside all the time, it's very hard for him to get out. He doesn't get to see his friends. He doesn't get to, do the stuff that he normally does. So everything is going to be magnified that way, right? So remembering that also allows us to accept it. But the most important thing that allows us to accept it is the fact that if we do accept it, we know that it will change in a period of time, right? And usually it's only about 15, 20 minutes tops, right? Oftentimes it's even less than that. Sometimes it can be even 5 minutes, right? But when you allow it to just sit, right, and make your, adjust your plans accordingly, right? And the thing is, like, I know some of you are probably saying, like, well, but what about the appointment? Like, we had a dentist appointment. We couldn't be late for it. We're going to miss the appointment. We're going to have to reschedule and all that. So the wonderful, amazing Dr. Gabor Mate says one of these things, says this in one of his books, is that what we wind up doing in those situations, right, where we say it's non-negotiable, we have to make this appointment, right? What we're doing there is we're trading short-term behavior for long-term emotional development. And folks, that's not good. That is not good, right? That is a losing investment every single time, right? So if you have to reschedule an appointment, reschedule the appointment. You know, if somebody's bleeding, if you have to get to the hospital, obviously that's different, right? But if it's just an appointment, a haircut, a dentist appointment, what have you, pushing that off for another few days or even a week or so, is going to be so much more, it's going to be such a significant trade-off for your child to be able to process their emotion and resolve the emotion, right? And then once that is resolved, now we can be present with one another, like I was talking about yesterday, right? Because in that emotion, right, while your son or daughter is in their big emotional, trying to deal with all this stuff, and you're trying to deal with all your stuff as it relates to their stuff, and you're both feeding off of each other, neither of you are present in that moment. Neither of you are, right? And that means that you're pushing each other away from each other. Right? And what that means is that there is no growth, there is no connection, there is no development that's happening within your child's brain and emotional self, and there's also no development in your relationship with your child, right? So that bond is being weakened, right? And if that happens enough times, the bond really does get very thin, and it gets harder and harder and harder to come back. That's why many kids, when they're teenagers, they're very rebellious, right? They don't want to deal with it because you've made things happen that hurt, right? And they recognize that. So now I have to get away from this person because this person hurts me, right? So this is where it becomes like very, very significant. It's not just about the dentist appointment. It's not just about the haircutting appointment. It's not just about getting to school on time when school's open again. It's about the big picture, right? And so again, this is all to say that when we're what we want to do is we want to be present as much as possible, right? Because when we're present, that's when we're strengthening that bond, and that's when we're establishing that connection with our children, right? And of course, I'm talking about children now, but this also applies to adult relationships, right? This applies to anything that we're doing: colleague relationships, spousal relationships, social relationships. It applies everywhere, right? The more present we are with one another, that is creating a bond between us and others, right? A bond creates communication, which creates, the transference of energy between two people. And that is what we're after in all of our relationships, right? So presence is key. And what I'm saying now is that the key to that presence is acceptance. And the key to the acceptance is the acknowledgement and the understanding and the remembering that things are impermanent, right? And this applies even to pain, right? Like when you're going through pain, I had a good friend a long time ago. He used to have a great way of dealing with his children when they would fall down and get hurt, right? The first thing he would say to them is that, okay, what you just felt now was the worst it's gonna feel. So it will get better. Every minute that goes by, it's going to feel a little bit better, right? And that's exactly right, because even physical sensations, right? They change. They dissipate. They move. They change, and that goes for our physical, our emotional, and our mental activity. Okay, it is all impermanent. Now, how do we practice this impermanence, right? How do we get to cultivate the understanding and the sort of, how do we get to remember and really ingrain this as a habit? Well, we do it by watching, okay? As we sit in either formal meditation or informal practices, right? Which I would be happy to help you to get started with. As we sit, one of the things we're doing is we're noticing our sensations, our emotions and our thoughts, right? One of my clients, who's a wonderful mother, she says it's set, sensation, emotion, thought, right? So she says, I get set to set. That's awesome. But that's what we're looking at, right? When we sense into the sensations of the body, and we sense into the emotions that are happening in our body, and we sense into the thoughts that are going through our mind, two really important things happen. Number one, we see how much these three things are interrelated and how much they sort of cause a cycle effect, right? But even perhaps more importantly, what we do is we see that it's constantly moving, right? There is a movement to it, right? The thoughts, they come into our mind and then they leave our mind. Unless we snag them and hold on to them and say, oh, no, I gotta follow this thought. I gotta, grapple with this one, right? But if we just let them go, which is again something else that we practice in meditation, then they come in and then they leave, right? Same thing with the emotions, right? 90 seconds, it's scientifically shown, right? That 90 seconds, the emotion is here and then it's gone, unless we do something to, renew it, right? Like we re-up on it, right? And then the sensations in our body, even really big pain that we might feel, right? If you have a toothache or you have a backache or some part of your body is hurting, right? You fall off your bike like I did over the winter, and you cut up your knee like you're 10 years old again, right? That's the last thing you need when you're 50. Trust me on that one. But when when that happens, right? There's like the pain. Oftentimes when we first kind of consider the pain, we feel like it's just this enormous thing that's just there and never going away. But the reality is that even the really big pain, if we sit with it, we notice that there's a throb, there's an ebb and a flow to it, right? So it dissipates, and when we can start to pay attention more and more to that pain, without, again, with acceptance, right? Accept that this is just what's happening right now. I'm in pain. And if I just accept it, instead of adding an emotional quotient to it, if I just accept that this is what's happening and I watch it, then what I'm able to do is I'm able to pay more attention to the times where the pain ebbs and dips, and then it doesn't feel as bad, right? You notice that there's actually spaces in between the throb of the pain. And the more you pay attention to those spaces, the more they sort of enlarge, and the spikes of the pain become less. And for that reason, I mean, I haven't taken ibuprofen or anything like that for years. I mean, many years. Even when I broke my collarbone, I took a little bit of ibuprofen in the first couple of days, but after that I just allowed myself to be with it, and I just allowed myself to feel it, to feel it kind of work its way through me, right? Because really all pain is just your body calling out for attention. So when you give it that attention, it really does change. It is kind of amazing. And then that way it becomes an object for our, for my meditation, right? Which is, as I said yesterday, John Kabat-Zinn, life becomes the curriculum, right? So anything that happens, and this is again, getting back to that concept, when your child is going through a big emotional thing, use this as a way to learn. Use it as a way to be curious and to expand your knowledge of how all this stuff is working. Life becomes your teacher, but it can only do that when you accept it, right? And you can only accept it by knowing that it is not going to be here forever. All right, folks, I like the way we brought that one back around. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you have any questions about this, please, as you can tell, I love to talk about this. I'm actually working on a book, which I'm really excited about. Be out in a couple of months, hopefully, and it's going to cover this stuff in a great detail. Last little note for you. Every Wednesday night, I do a parenting, a connection parenting workshop is what I'm calling it, okay? It's a presentation where I talk about, the importance of connecting to our children and how to do it. And I talk about various exercises you can do to develop this connection, and I would love for you to join me. So if you want the link for that, just hit me up with an email or drop a comment. I'll send you the link. It's free. There is a paid option if you want coaching attached to it. If you want to, there's a couple of tiers that include either a group coaching or a group and an individual coaching. So we can talk about that out if you want to know. But yeah, that's available for you for free if you want to just join the presentation and learn something about it, and then see where it goes from there. So I wanted to share that with you. Thanks for listening, and I wish you well. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.